This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Welcome back to Resilient Voices and Beyond. I'm so excited because this is my last episode of season 1, episode 51. And I just want to take a moment to just say how appreciative I am for all of you guys listening, all of you guys that have been supporting, all of the guests I've had on here. I could not and would not be here without you guys. So thank you for entrusting in me with your experiences and your truths and your stories, and helping me provide a safe space for all who are in the child welfare arena, whether stakeholder or person of lived experience, to be able to come here and be able to share their experiences and their expertise and purpose of educating and having a conversation in a space for dialogue. So thank you for that. Without further ado, because you guys know I can talk, I'm going to have my guest introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ricardo Ortega. I am one of 15 newly appointed LA County Youth Commissioners of the Los Angeles area. I represent District 5. The Youth Commission is composed of former or current probation and foster youth in LA County. Our responsibility is to ensure that all 37 county agencies across LA County provide youth-centered services and quality of service to our youth in our county as well. A little bit of background on me. I am a former foster youth here in LA County. I have been in and out of care 3 times. The last time I was taken away from my parents, I was 15 at that time, and I exited out care during the pandemic. So very interesting times of COVID and how the child welfare system had to readjust itself to address the concerns of current and former foster youth that were being kicked out of the system during the pandemic and being without a place to stay. That's a little bit of who I am. And I am a first-time home owner in Quartz Hill. So if you don't know where that is, that's on Lancaster Pond area, in between those 2 areas. And so I'm very excited to start this new chapter of being a home owner in California. I know it's very expensive, but to be able to accomplish that, I think that's one of my major accomplishments that I was able to do. I haven't met a lot of foster youth, former foster youth, that were able to purchase their homes at the age of 21. So I think that's a major accomplishment.
And I'm on mute, so sorry. You dropped a lot of nuggets in that introduction, and I want to dive a little bit deeper in there. So if you can tell us, when did this journey begin? When did this start with your own personal experience? And walk us through that, because you said you entered in care 3 different times, and then you exit out during the pandemic. So I'm interested in hearing that experience to whatever extent that you're willing to share.
Yeah, so the first time I entered care was, or every time that I touched the system, was when I was, I believe, like around 7 years old. It was me and my 2 younger siblings. We were taken away from our parents, put into a foster home for 3 months, and then we got reunification. And then again, at the age of 8, we were taken away and put into relative caregivers as well, in foster homes. But I think the last time it was more traumatic, I will say, due to the fact that my two younger siblings and myself were separated and placed into different homes. My sister was placed in Lancaster. My brother was placed in Compton, and I myself, it was very difficult for finding a home for me. So they put me like in La Puente, and then they moved me to the shelter in LAC USC Medical Center. And then from there, they moved me to Gardena. And then from Gardena, they moved me to West Hill. So they're just bouncing me around into different types of placements. And then finally, I was placed with my older brother in the city of Lynwood. All of our siblings were back together. It was very traumatic for me, I'll say, because yes, we had family visits with my siblings, but we missed almost, about over 2.5 years of not having any sort of relationship during these critical times of teenager, and kind of relying on each other. So when they bunched us back in together, there was a lot of catching up to do and a lot of trauma that we had to re-engage ourselves on how we're going to deal with it, how we're going to move forward with it, how we're going to cope with it, and kind of live in the same space. So for me, it was just very, very difficult time. And also, moving from my old high school to a new high school, my siblings the same way. I think it was just more of reconnecting that took the longest time, with my siblings and even my older brother, because we didn't really have a relationship with my older brother at all. So for us, it was like a sort of a stranger but not a stranger type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, you spoke about like reintegrating with family at some point and how it was very traumatic. What did that look like mental health wise? Was that thought about, by caseworkers, or by, when they did that, it's like, should we slowly do this, or was it just like, yep, this is it, we're gonna see what happens, like, and did they give you guys, emotional support to work through that with each other, or what did that look like?
To be honest, I never wanted, no, your face. I was not planning on moving in with my older brother. My younger brother, my little sister, they were already on the process of moving in with him. I was like, no, I'm okay. I'm okay where I'm at. I have that stability. I was in a group home. I was, in a good place, I felt. And so my thoughts were just go overnight. We'll see, try it out. And then, if you don't like it, then we'll just go back. I was like, okay, fine. So I went on a Friday over the weekend, and then next thing I heard is, oh, we have the court, they're having an emergency meeting on Monday for your placement. And I'm like, what? So I was trying to reach my attorney. So I ended up the judge is like, okay, move him to his older brother's home. And I was like, they tricked me. They kind of like forced it down my throat. So afterwards, there was really no transitional period, no emotional support, no reconnection of families, and it was just like, dump it, here you go, good luck. If you want therapy, let us know, but nothing more than that. So I think it was a disservice on DCFS part of not, creating that smooth transition, because they moved me from what I felt was a stable placement for me to another placement, with someone that I kind of had, is biological related to me, but I never had a relationship with him, or, my younger siblings. Like, there was, we all came at different levels of our traumas. So it was very difficult, for my older brother and for us and for his wife and his two daughters. So it was like a lot. Like, we were all different levels. There was no support whatsoever. Just emotionally, there was nothing like that until we all say, well, we want therapy, we want some sort of support. And so we all, got that. But for some of us, like I said, we're not ready to deal with that trauma. And for some of us, we were. And so how are we going to move forward when the one person doesn't want to face their trauma? So that created a lot of imbalance in our home, but we were able to adjust to it and kind of not move too much forward without that one person.
Wow. I think of this analogy that one of my dear friends, that, and I don't know if she's okay with me sharing her name, so I'm gonna just go say the analogy, but she talked about, when I was doing a panel with her, that with her siblings and everything, she was explaining to a caseworker, that it's very much like when you have siblings and you all experience trauma. It's like being in a car accident and being in different seats. Now, everyone is going to feel the impact differently. It's going to affect them in injuries possibly differently. Not everyone is going to have the same scar. Not everyone is going to have the same impact. Not everyone is going to have the same memory of the event because they're in different locations of that car. And so many times I hear that with people who went into care with their siblings or people who went into care but their siblings didn't, so in my personal experience, I went into care. My siblings never went into care, but my siblings have experience, being under CPS investigations and stuff like that. But we all have different dads. So my dad left. My mom was the only person there. My mom, became, one of my abusers to a certain extent. And then my siblings, they went off, by the time it was time for me to grow up, they went off to their dads, as an escape group, what have you. And I wasn't able to do that, as such, and I hear many different stories when it comes to that. So what does that look like going forward, just building this timeline? So now you're at your older brothers. You guys requested therapy. Not everyone wanted to do it, so it put a stalemate on that therapy, and that progress. So what did that look like after that part?
I think after therapy, we all were able to cope with it, right? And that's what therapy was saying. Okay, what is something that will make you or allow you to cope with your trauma? What do you need in order to address your trauma? So for me, it was more, okay, I want to travel. I want to work on legislation. I want to work on policy and advocacy. That's my way of handling my own trauma and coping with my own trauma. So that was my way of moving forward. So like I was connected with CYC, California Youth Connection, and I was working on legislation with them and policy. After that, I also started working with our State Senator Ricardo Lara, in his Young Senators program and going out in the community and representing foster youth. So I just started being more involved in California in our policy and legislative work. And so for me, it was more on how can I apply my experience so that other folks don't have to go through that. And so what came after that, I went to Sacramento. I got elected by my peers to serve on the Legislative and Policy Committee in California Youth Connection, and I worked on my first bill. My first bill was Assemblymember Bill 2247 with Assemblymember Gipson, and that bill was, I guess, for me, very instrumental because it focused on placement stability and relationship stability. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was like, okay, how can I put my personal experience, my personal feelings into this piece of legislation? How can I do that? Because I face 7-day notice. How can we address 7-day notices? And so this piece of legislation removed the 7-day to make it a 14-day. But before you get to that point, you have to create a CFT meeting to ensure that there's a discussion before you remove a child, before you remove a youth from their placement. Also focusing.
If you don't mind me interjecting right here, because I think it's important because you're hitting some really tight points. And I know we in different states, so they may be similar things and we talk about the same stuff, but I want you to be able to break those down so we know. So 7-day notices, are you talking about to be replaced or to be removed from a placement? That notice is there, or what does that look like in your state?
So in California, a foster parent or foster placement can remove a youth and put in a 7-day notice on that youth. They can say, they can call social worker and say, hey, kind of like when you're getting kicked out of your place, out of a rent, when you're not paying rent, it's the same thing. So they'll inform DCFS, hey, I'm putting a 7-day notice on this youth. You have 7 days to find him a new placement. and get him out of my home. So that's in California.
That is wild to me. I'm sorry. That is like mind blowing. Like, because I can imagine people like, yeah, no, we don't want you here. Here's the, y'all got to figure something out. I don't know what y'all gonna do if he ain't going on the 7th day. But what?
Right.
Wow.
So in California, we have that policy where the caregiver can say, get this kid out, and social worker has to move quick because these, that's it. Like, they can't do anything else. They can try to work with the caregiver or the foster placement, but most likely a lot of times, like, that's it. So we removed that 7-day period to 14 days. To give enough time for mediation to kick in. So CFT, the Child and Family Team meeting, is supposed to take place to figure out, okay, why did you want to put this notice on this youth? Is it because something crazy, like he's AWOLing all the time, he kicks you, or is there something like that, or is it more of you just don't like it because of their ethnicity or because of their gender bias, or what is it? And that will allow that social worker and the system to know who this placement likes. If this placement likes pure white kids, then that's what the social worker is going to see in their system when they're going to place different youth in their home. So it kind of keeps track of these placements as well. This piece of legislation also focused on ensuring that, created some guidelines that you cannot kick a youth out of their home at 10 p.m. in trash bags. No. So we created guidelines on how to move and guide DCFS and placements and relative caregivers and foster parents and different people. So this piece of legislation was very big because we never seen it before in California. So out of this bill, a whole movement happened. And probation was like, hey, we're about us. What about us? And Native tribes as well in California, what about our youth? And so a whole movement came, and it was just very powerful for me. And then out of that, it kind of allowed me to go back into therapy and kind of just dumped everything. Like, this is what was going on. This is how I felt, and kind of bringing memories that were kind of oppressed for a long time. So it was very powerful, like that, how it led to me addressing my own trauma even further than I thought I had memories of.
Wow. And I like, as you're expressing how you heal and how you cope, I think about my own self, I remember my first pivotal moment of feeling a sense of relief is when I did a panel. And it was kind of like on the spot, and like it's just asking your experience. And I went to tell, and next thing you know, I cried and stuff like that and what have you. But I felt a sense of relief, and I found refuge in advocacy and working on legislation and policy, and all these different things. And I try to explain that to so many different people, and they're like, what, what you mean? And like, therapy has helped. Don't get me wrong, it has. But for some reason, it's been a lot of self-therapy that also has helped, with putting myself in the room, advocating and making sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to someone else, and that feeling and being able to work at that has helped me cope and deal and come to a place of peace in my own trauma. So I can appreciate that from your story. I can honor that, because it's very similar to me, I just, I find it so wild that this was happening. And correct me, when and what year was this movement? When did it start? Because I'm very interested to hear if this was in the modern age.
Yeah, actually, it hasn't been that long. It was back in 2017 that we worked on this piece of legislation. So it took us a while. So it's now on implementation, and in California, it is very difficult to implement. Once we create the legislation, there it is. Yeah. But now it's up to these other state departments to implement it and interpret that piece of legislation and then send that out to the counties. And so I think that's where I feel the commission comes in, right? Our LA County Youth Commission, where we have jurisdiction over all 37 of them, like every single one. So I'm assigned to the district attorney's office, the chief executive office of the county, also the coroner's office, and WEDEX, which is like the workforce development. So these 4 departments are, I think, in some way, somehow play a crucial role in that piece of legislation, how you interpret it. But I think it is very important to acknowledge that the fact that this is still happening, because different counties interpret it differently, right? So they can do whatever they want and how they're going to implement this piece of legislation. So I think for me, this movement is still going on. We hear it. But it's now up to the youth and how they're going to advocate. Hey, before you move me from this home, you need to put that CFT meeting. Where is my CFT meeting that I'm supposed to have before you remove me from my home? So it's just different things like that we're still working on. But at least the foundation is there, and now it's up to build from that foundation.
Right. And it's crazy to me because, and I'm going to tell you why it's crazy to me, because a lot of our other states, including Michigan and stuff like that, we consider California a best practice in child welfare. I'm just being completely honest with you guys. In certain aspects, like we don't believe that they're perfect, but it's crazy when you hear this and you're like, well, we consider them best practice, but they also have their own issues. They putting kids out at 10 o'clock in trash bags. I mean, like, that is wild for me to hear. That foster parent, because I know it happens. I do know it happens. It happens all over the nation. But it's wild for me to hear that we have to create policies and procedures. So tell somebody you cannot put somebody out because they're part of LGBTQ and you don't like it. You can't put somebody out because they are of a different ethnicity and you don't like it. At like 10, 11 at night because you don't like it. And matter of fact, and put them in trash bags, or just add on top of them you don't like them, and to add on top and just say, well, your life is condensed to this trash bag. That's mind-blowing to me. And I think about that, I'm like, do these people not see the injustice in that? Because I know if I were to go and ask, and not to judge, I know if I were to go to ask some foster parents that have done that nationwide, that have utilized these things, and like, well, I don't know if I really want this person, they don't really fit, that word, they don't really fit in our house or our cultural dynamic here. And not to ask them, just pure off an interview and trying to get where, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't want to be treated the same way. And that's what it comes down to, respect and treatment, and that's why, this podcast is very important, because having these conversations, I have a few foster parents that listen to this, and caseworkers and stuff like that, have told me, these conversations have been pivotal, because sometimes it has helped them reflect on themselves, and decisions that they make. One thing I want to ask, as my little ramble on, because I want to get back to, finishing that timeline of your story, is what does foster homes look like? Because I know it's a crisis over here, but I want to know, what does that look like for teens trying to be fostered in the state of California? What does that look like over there?
I'll say it varies, depending on where you're trying to be at. If you're trying to go into Humboldt County, is very different, very different regulations, very different audience of targeting caregivers and foster parents. In LA, is become more of a business side of housing these youth. And so that's something that the county and even the state has been trying to remove from it. Like, this is not a business that you can just own and host these kids. No, this is, that humanity part. Like, giving back. This is a human being. And so there's a whole campaign that has been created back when this piece of legislation that I was referring to opened up a whole can of worms. Because they're like, okay, well, if this is happening, why is it happening? Because at 21, that $1,195 or something like that is going to be cut. Like, what's going to, like, can that foster parent allow this youth, if they build that relationship with that family, can they stay longer and, create some sort of relationship there? But it was more of a business now. Foster parents have become more of a business, have become more of, foster agencies coming up and hiring new people to host these children. So it's a very different dynamic. My district, where I represent, is District 5 in LA County. We have about 14% of LA County's population in my district. And up here is very different from what you think about when it comes to, when you hear Los Angeles, you hear about downtown area, Beverly Hills. No, there's another side of LA County, which is more up, that is, very desert, very away from resources. And it's just very important to acknowledge that there's no transportation up here. In order to get to your mental health therapy, you have to leave at least 4 hours before from your home in order to catch it. You have to leave 4 hours.
4 hours before to.
Because our buses pass every 1 to 2 hours. Because it's very far, everything's far away. You might not have internet access in our area. Yes. And then you might not, and this is the same thing in Watts, in Wilmington, in Compton. Some of these, areas up there don't have access to internet. And during the pandemic, I did an interview with Fox when there was a whole thing about rising crime and blaming it on Black and brown folks. I spoke about, well, how do you expect these individuals to survive during the pandemic? How do you expect them to have access to food and water? How do you expect them to feed their families, feed their cousins, if they don't have internet? Like, in order to apply for EBT and food stamps, you need internet. During the pandemic, our offices were closed. There was no way of you having that one-on-one conversation. In order to apply for this, apply for Medi-Cal, you needed internet in order to do it. So, when you back them into a corner, people are going to react, and they're going to be in survivor mode in order to ensure that they're able to survive. That's not making excuses for them, but that's just an example of the inequality of our services, of our access to quality of life and humanity respect. So it's just many issues that came up during the pandemic, and now we're just trying to play catch up and trying to address everything that's going on. But for my district, my main goal for District 5 is how to ensure that we have quality data of how many youth are in our district. Because I've heard that there's times that youth are being thrown out, that they're just ditched in our streets and end up homeless. Why is it that these foster parents are doing that? Why is it that these social workers are not keeping track of these youth? Why is it that, we here in our district, there's been a lot of children who belong in foster care have been killed while under DCFS watch? Why is it that? So that's my main concern here in my district, because it is far away. We have a big population of foster youth in our district. How can we ensure that we know if there's even more of them that we don't know about? But that's just a whole struggle that is going on. I'm excited for the commission to have this power of investigating, creating policy recommendations. Something that is very important for the commission is to give grades to these county agencies. Like DCFS, are you going to get an A? Are you going to get a B? Or are you going to get an F? So I'm very excited about that toolkit. And also kind of bringing awareness of like, hey, there's foster youth in our district. Why is it 4 hours that our foster youth have to leave from Little Rock or Lake Elizabeth, which is like in the mountains, no internet, no cell phone reception up there? How are they supposed to get their therapy sessions, especially with gas prices? So,
Man, look, I do not go into creating these podcasts to offend or make anybody mad, but this is like crazy to me. Like, this is, I'm just sitting here listening, and it's mind blowing because I think about sex trafficking, human trafficking. I think about the many Black and brown and Native people who are going missing, and they're going missing from your side of the states, you know, and stuff like that. I think about that, and then I think about how many of those are foster youth or alumni. You know, it's crazy. It's crazy to me to hear the state of emergency that you guys are in the state of California.
I think it's also, you mentioned something very important. I also work at Children's Law Center, and yesterday we had a training on CSEC youth. CSEC are those human trafficking and those different youth. And what they kept on pointing out was, this is the data that DCFS has. According to DCFS, there was only about like maybe 1,000 youth that are human trafficking. And I'm like, I doubt it. Have you guys been to Compton? Have you guys been to Long Beach, where the port is at, where they bring those youth at night? There's been reports of that, where there's the sheriff's department hosting and raiding these places that have these young people for CSEC youth. Where are those youth going? The other thing is, not to get too political, but when our former president left office, there was a huge population of youth. Within DCFS in LA County, they have a unit that handles these youth. They were so used to having maybe like 100 cases, very small unit, but once this guy left, their caseload skyrocketed. They had about 15,000 youth waiting to be connected with families. There was only like maybe 4 social workers for these cases. They were so overwhelmed. So there's just a whole huge of need to address these different populations. But however, now we go back into the question of, are they considered foster youth? That's where everyone's thinking, technically not. They're not considered foster youth. These unaccompanied minors. CSEC youth, maybe sometimes, but a lot of the times they go into the probation system for some reason. So why is it that we're punishing them for being trafficked? So it's just very interesting where you start to, that's where everyone's like, okay, well, they're not, how are we going to tag them? Are we going to tag them immigrants? Are we going to tag them as deported people that we're going to need to deport, foster youth, probation youth, or just not care about them?
So because we hit on a lot of different subjects, and there's one big piece. It's one big piece I gotta mention, because those who listen to my podcast know that I've been in so many different CCIs, which are residential placements and what have you. What does that look like for you and your state? How is that experience? Because I know there's been a shift with Think of Us and other people, bringing up and highlighting. And I know in the state of Michigan, we've had the death of a young man named Cornelius, which has shifted in our state to bring more regulations of our residential facilities, our child care institutes, and what have you. So what does that look like for you guys over there? And let me lay this question out. So here, state of Michigan, we've implemented the Family First Act, with that being implemented, we've seen a shift. We don't have a lot of foster homes. Nonetheless, a lot of people who want to foster teens. So what happens, what happens is those who have behavior issues for whatever reason, they end up being placed in juvenile facilities until they can find a residential that they can be held in. And because of after COVID, there's been an influx of staffing and stuff like that. They can be in a juvenile facility waiting for however long. So even if they went into that juvenile facility without behavior issues, you put somebody in a jail or prison for however long, they gonna have some issues to talk about or to deal with, so that happens, and now they're placed in this residential, and they're told, well, we're gonna only keep you here for this amount of time or what have you, but in all actuality, they don't have no places else to put them, so they end up staying in these residentials for years until they can age out, or bouncing from residential to residential and stuff like that. So what does that look like on the West Coast in the state of California? Because I'm intrigued, because I know what it looked like over here. It's a hot mess. To best describe it, it's a hot mess. But there is hope. I don't, there is some hope. We got some reforms, some initiatives happening. We got some good directors in office now that are pushing some initiatives, that I full-heartedly believe are good intended, to change these narratives, but also we deal with it streaming down the line properly. We can make the policies, we make the legislation, we can push these initiatives, but being received by all parties and streaming down the line properly is something that's going to have to happen. But back to my question, what does that look like for you guys?
It for us, I mean, what they're called for us is STRPs. So it stands for short-term residential therapeutic program. So they're supposed to be, our youth supposed to be there for the maximum will be 6 months. And thankfully, they've been more regulated now than before. So they have to provide some sort of program where they're gonna have to, who is gonna go to therapy? What is your therapy contract? Job placement. Where is your job placement? Who's your contact for that? Schools, so there's more detailed information and accountability, which I found very interesting, because before they were like, whatever, do whatever you want. But now it's like, no, we're getting serious about these groups. There's even more judicial involvement as well, with our dependency court, and judges have to approve it. If you're going to extend the youth to be there more than 6 months, there has to be a court saying, okay, he can stay there, or that they can stay there longer. But they're also going to have to be, social workers going to have to continue to look, and they have to show that they're looking for a placement. We actually, in the commission, we visited one in South Central. But what we saw was, we visited a young ladies one. The main issue that we're having with these residential programs is a lot of AWOLs, a lot of AWOLs, and a lot of youth leaving to go get high for substance abuse and alcohol, and that's something that we're seeing a lot. And the other part that we're also seeing is that they're placing these youth that are, a lot of the times, are like overlap between probation and foster youth. So they're placing these youth in another gang's territory. So that's creating a safety issue for that youth. Also, a lot of the time, some of these homes are like near prostitution. So prostitution strip. So for us, that was a major concern with the ladies that we saw, because they're young ladies. They're, and being so close to the boulevard where guys can pick up young ladies for prostitution. But in regards to the services, they're there. In regards to the youth, the main issues are AWOLing for substance abuse, alcohol, and also the main one that a lot of them have been saying is I feel like they don't care about me. They don't care about my stuff, the representation that has with, like if you own something very special to your culture, when you have to move every year or every 6 months to a new program, things get lost, right? Like when you're packing your stuff, you might forget something that is very crucial to your identity, but it gets lost in that placement move. So the identity part of who you are and your belongings have been another issue that has been risen through these programs. In regards to Think of Us, I think they're not as involved in LA or in California. I think their major launch or awareness in our state was with that funding stream that came from I think it was one of the Twitter owners. That was their major launch. That's how they were introduced into Child Welfare Society in California. But I don't think they're very involved in our state as much as other states might have that, because I think for us, we have a lot of organizations that really care about child welfare. So it's kind of hard to kind of get in that mix with those organizations.
Okay. Wow. So it's almost, what has been named as best practice has a lot more issues under the cover, and like I fully want to attend. Like I didn't come into this podcast to speak with you and be like, okay, wow, this is all these issues and stuff like that. It just so happens this is what is happening. This is the reality. And the important part is to talk about the reality, not talk about the script that has been given to sugarcoat what is really happening, because we're not going to get anything done. We're not going to be able to identify the issues and really bring those to the table and figure out solutions. I'm a very, I'm a very big person where I'm like, now is the time. Now is the time. Like we can't think about next week. We can't think about, now is the time to talk about it and build resolves. We know that resolves are not going to happen immediately. We understand that, especially people with lived experience. I've seen the Michigan child welfare system evolve so much in my own personal experience, for the better or for the worse, and that's only been in I'm about to be 25, my 24 years of life, I've seen that. And that's a short period of time, considerably, but it's still time, that has to be given and lessons that have to be learned. So we understand that, but if we're not having the right conversations and bringing the truth to the table about this is the issue, and we're dampening down data and numbers to make us look better, it doesn't help anyone.
Well, I think just to add to that, not only being part of the conversation, but having the power to change it. So I think a lot of the times, like we are part, we're giving our voice, we're giving our opinions, we're giving our experiences. Okay, great. What happens after that?
Right.
Are we being tokenized because of our lived experience to move an agenda forward? And that's something that a lot of folks, a lot of organizations, and a lot of people tend to be tokenized just to move that agenda forward. But if you give the youth the opportunity to be there from the beginning to the end, you're going to see a major shift in what you're trying to accomplish. And I think there's ways of doing it where if you're not trying to ruffle feathers, just kind of being clear and being transparent will be helpful. I think the way that the county here in LA is doing, they recognize that, we have a body that gives their experience. No, we're not there anymore. The county needs to give us the authority and power to move these conversations that we've been having for years into action. And that's what we need to move our counties, our elected officials, and these organizations to do? How can we give the authority to the people that have lived experience in something that they have never lived before?
So I want to do something a little bit different here. If you could give me top 5 issues, and top 5, or if there's more, we can say top 10. Top 5, top 10 issues that are detrimental and affecting youth in your district or in the state as a whole right now. And then if there are solutions that you have thought about and have brought up. So we can start with that.
Okay. I think for me, and based on conversations I've been having, a lot of the issues have been on accessibility to resources. That's the number one. There's money out there, but how are we allowing these youth to have access to this money? Transportation, mental health services, quality mental health services, not just, oh, I go see a therapist once a week, and no, what are you getting out of it? Is it helpful? Or do you need a different type of, therapy? Do you need art therapy? There's different ways of therapy in handling your trauma. Does that help better for you? Another one is more on the educational side. How can we increase our 3% of youth who graduate with a bachelor's degree? What can we do to support and increase that number of foster youth? I think another one is the accessibility to mentors. I think if you have a strong sense of people in your corner that are not paid to see you once a month, to go and build that, how can you have a strong sense of long-lasting relationships? Not those that are getting paid to see you, not those that are, charging Medi-Cal once, every time you go see them. No, I'm talking about real mentorship, real people that really care about your success and investment in you. Let me see what else. I think is just being housing is another one, but I know that's an issue across California, housing. I think it all comes back to the stigmatism that comes with being in a foster youth. Once you said the word foster youth, these people, the general population, might not want to rent to you because, you're what do they call it? An unstable person. That's what some people call it. Or if you say the word probation, you're an unstable person, because when they hear probation, they automatically feel that you were in jail, that you were, with these gangs. And if your skin color is another layer to that. So housing and discrimination within housing, it exists. There's legislation, there's policy in there. But how can you implement that policy, right? How can we teach these young people that that's discrimination? But just housing in general is just very difficult in California. It's very expensive to live in California. It is becoming extremely. I was watching a movie the other day where it was like only meant for the rich people. It's becoming that here in California. It is becoming unaffordable to youth. I think it's becoming uninhabitable. I can't even say that word. But it's becoming an issue for youth here, for foster youth, because you have all that extra layers of barriers and challenges. And if you're not able to kiss ass to your social worker, kiss ass to your independent living program worker, you're set up for failure. You are set up for what I usually call the 3 pathways: homeless, in jail, or dead. Those are the three pathways that this system tends to give us the option to choose which one you want. And it is very rare when you see a youth that creates their own pathway. It is very rare, because some way that pathway that they take, it leads them to one of those three. But just opportunity, accessibility to the resources, and just allowing us to become independent at a adequate time. At 21 in California, you're still developing yourself. You're still going through that transition of adulthood. So when they cut you off at 21, that's difficult. So I've been a strong supporter in increasing our age to 26. So hopefully sometimes down the road, California will be able to champion that, where extending foster care to 26. Right now, we get health insurance until 26. So why is it that at 21 you're automatically considered an adult?
That rings a bell, and a light bulb turns on for me when you say that, because I'm very much an advocate of, we have to recognize the science that had been put into this. Years ago, we had people look into how trauma affects the brain. They tells us that the brain doesn't fully develop until you're like 25. Unless there has been trauma that has been affected, where we have seen in some cases where trauma stunts you and leave you at a certain age until you're able to deal with that or process it. So if we think about, that's what's affecting everyone who's been in the child welfare in many different ways, that they're stunt and their development is delayed in growth, and they're taking back years every placement that they're moved to, which we have set. There's the data, there's the facts behind all those things. But we're expecting, hey, at 21, at 18, go ahead, you got it. We ain't got nothing else for you, but go ahead, you got it. But we recognize that we need medical insurance until you're 26, but nothing else. So I'm a big advocate, and I know some people are going to be like, well, you guys already got all this. Why y'all trying to get more stuff? Like, we have to recognize what we're doing. And we're seeing that by letting someone out at 18, letting someone out at 21, granted, some people do make it. Some people do. They persevere, that resiliency. Some people, and I'm going to be quite frank here, I had to become able to speak up for myself. If I stayed the Michael who worked with the flow, was quiet and stuff like that, I probably would have failed through the gaps. At 21, I probably would have ended up in a whole nother pipeline. Everyone in the child welfare system aren't advocates. Some of them just want to, look, I just want to be okay and I don't want to be out there like that. And they should be able to do that without having harm happen to them. But unfortunately, most people who are more introverted fall through the cracks because they don't really speak up like everybody else. And that's a big piece when I, made my mission for this podcast is giving a voice to the voices that were once silenced and that are silenced. Because those people, amongst people who do advocate for themselves, fall prey to systems after this one system and just continue going forward.
Yeah, I think it's just a cycle, right? There's a cycle that happens where, for me, I have two younger siblings still in the system. So how can I ensure that they didn't have to go through what I had to go through when I was, ILP eligible? All these different systems that are out there. And now DCFS knows who I am. And they tell their social workers, whatever they need, give it to them. Whatever they ask you, give it to them. But not every youth has, that amount of support from the agency, from the system that is impacting your life. not everyone has that level of commitment from that provider that is trying to take care of you, right? So how can we ensure that these introverts youth get what they need and get access to the services that are out there that have been implemented there, that have millions of dollars that have been allocated to this process? But I think for me, it's more on just reminding everyone that just because you belong to a foster youth, probation youth, homeless, whatever population you fall under, we're still human beings. We're still children. We are still young adults that were taken away from, our parents because of whatever reason. And also reminding people, like, we are human beings too. We had more struggles than a person in Beverly Hills might have, a person in another area that is more wealthy, that have more accessibility to services, that our parents tried their best at some point in their life, but they were products of their environment. And that's what it is. And some of us in our foster youth community might have the same struggles, might be products of their own environment and be in that cycle, staying there. Or they might see the light at the end of the tunnel and they're going to move everything around to move forward and say, I'm not going to stay in this cycle. I'm not going to stay in this product of this environment. I'm going to move somewhere else. And that takes courage. But you also need to understand that there's systems out there that are going to try to oppress that movement of that youth. So for me, when I bought my home, when I started making some good money, damn well everyone started coming after me. Damn well, the government was like, oh, wait, you're making this amount of money? You own a house? We're going to take these things away from you. And they started like that. So either we're preparing our youth to move up the ladder of success and be prepared for those different systems that are supposedly care about you, but really don't care about you. And so it's just very different pathways in order to succeed. And it is just very difficult because some of us are not prepared. Like you said, introverts, how are we giving them the skills and the armor to get prepared for this battle that they're about to go out in our communities?
Wow. We've hit so many pivotal things that are not just only affecting Michigan, that's not only affecting California, but are affecting our nation as a whole. And I'm a big person, we've had many different presidents and many different people spread this aspect of hope and making things great and all these things, but you have a huge population that has been suffering dehumanization, re-traumatization, institutionalization, and many other lizations, and crisis and pipelines of systems for years, and our study facing them. I find it an issue and an outcry when we have to create simple policies to not kick somebody out at 10, 11, 12 because of what they may say their gender is, what they may believe in, what their culture may be, what may be their spirituality. I find it offensive that we have to create legislation and policy about basic human rights to safety, stability, and I'm gonna even add love. Why do I have to pay for love in America? Why do I have to pay for nurturing support in America? These are basic things that you would think like we able to get, but unfortunately foster youth in America have to fight twice as hard, if not 3 times as hard, to be able to get basic things.
Well, I wouldn't even extend that not only to foster youth, but to some extent, everyone, every single young person in our country
Mm-hmm.
who makes whatever the government considers you poor have to deal with that. You could be black,
Yeah.
brown, white, whatever color you are, whatever ethnicity, you have to, in some way, somehow, have to struggle in
Mm-hmm.
order for the government and even the government to take action. Why is it that these young children in Texas had to suffer and lose their lives? Why is it that it took a massacre to cause reaction? Why is it that we have to wait until someone to die, children to die, in order to create basic legislation and policy in our regulations? Why do we have to get to that point? Why do we have to get to that point in order to come together as a community? It doesn't matter your ethnicity and doesn't matter your politics, in order to bring people together. Why can't we just be human beings and love each other and show that unity in our communities? And to be honest, when I moved to my area, it's a different environment up here. Up here, everyone cares about each other. There's that closeness of community. There's that sense of community up here where I live. And when I got here, it was very shocking to me because everyone cares about each other. If they see you struggling, they'll help you. Where can you see that? What other community can you see neighbors caring about other neighbors, caring about how you feel, how you look? Hey, do you need something to eat? Where do you see that in other communities? We're not, when you're in more lower income communities, they care about surviving. That's their survival mode. They care about them and their families and their loved ones. Doesn't matter your neighbor, doesn't matter if your other neighbor got shot, they care about surviving. And in these other neighborhoods, they already survive. They live okay. So they don't mind sharing. But that's a mentality, a system that has taught you to only care about yourself and care about your people, and have that narrowed down. But like you said, why do we have to create legislation and policy for basic human love, basic treatment? Why do we have to do that? Just because we belong to a system that at some times doesn't care about us and doesn't show us love, why do those other humans that are helping, supposedly, treating us like property? And it goes back, and I don't want to make it a racial thing, but why?
It is what it is.
I was not trying to go there. I'm not trying to go to that part, but I'm just saying, to be honest, when I saw one of my friends, he was like, "Hey, have anyone told you that this analogy about when you go to the animal shelter and you see all these dogs there?" He's like, that's what when I hear the word foster youth, that automatically comes to my mind. A bunch of kids who are dogs in cages, and these people are coming in to try to choose which one they want.
Man.
And I was like, I took offense to it. But then the more that I thought about it, and then I saw that movie with what's that guy, the Mark something,
Mark.
Yeah, when I saw that movie, and then you see like the teenagers on one side of the park and then the kids on the other side, they're in a park. It reminded me of like, wait, that is true. That's in some cities and counties, that's how they do their child welfare.
They post the pictures of youth, and they you can select youth. You can select. This is something that actually happens. I know we have it, and I'm not going to disclose because I want to make nobody mad, So we have a website dedicated, and you post the youth on there and little bio and stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure they tell the youth to probably smile or what have you, and hopefully you find a home. And it's man,
I'm like,
history is just, as a history person, like it's too many similarities and too many things just repeating itself in just different fashions and it may look a little bit different, but it just feels so similar.
Well, I will say it's institutionalized racism. It's just, we don't call it slavery. We just change the name of it, right? And a more modern term, if it makes sense. But I think that at the end of the day, we just need to recognize it and say, hey, you know, this is what is going on. This is how it is. And if you're okay with it, hell, let's just keep it how it is. Let's just move forward. But if you're not okay with it, if you want change, I think we have the power to change. We have the power to unite. Doesn't matter your ethnicity, if you're a former or current or not a foster youth or probation youth, whatever we all have our stories. You know, those that have not been impacted by these, those are, you know, people that we want to work with because they're able to respect our point of view. But I feel like there's people out there that want change, but they don't know how to get to that point. So how can those that are extrovert help those introverts manage that anger that they have, that rebellious part of us that want to create change? How can we help them? Like how I told you, like legislation and policy and advocacy was my way of dealing with trauma. How can we create that negative internal stuff to positive and long-lasting change?
For me, you know, because there's many, we label these different populations, you know, foster youth, you know, refugees, you know, unaccompanied minors and juvenile delinquents. Like, personally, we all are brothers and sisters in my heart. You know, that's just how I think. Like, if your parents ain't there, like, look, I've been there, you know. It shouldn't be hard for children, you know. It shouldn't be hard. And we have to think about now, more crucially, with riots, with mass shootings, with massacres, with sex trafficking and human trafficking, just so many different things that are just downright evil and negative that are happening nowadays. What are we saying to that next generation? What are we saying to the generation that are raising that next generation, still being young adults themselves, children themselves? You know, what are we saying to those people? Because, you know, we have a lot of, you know, I like to call them the old guard, not saying everybody's old, but, you know, old people up there, you know, 30s, you know, a little bit older, stuff like that, whichever, not trying to be offensive. But what are you guys saying to these younger people below you? What are you guys role modeling? What are you guys wanting to see? Because as you pass on the mantle of advocacy, what legacy are you leaving? You know, there's going to come a time when me and you, Ricardo, we got to pass it on. You know, what is the legacy we want to leave, and what is the change we want to see? Like I said, I started advocating at 15 out of a group home. And my first advocacy thing was advocating for my group home to keep their home visits and not be consequented because of one individual's actions or because staff wanted to consequent us on basic rights that we deserve, being able to get a phone call, being able to talk to our caseworker, being able to call our GALs, being able to go on a home pass. I shouldn't have had to court ordered my visits, so a residential facility can't take away my visits because of another individual's actions or because the staff was having a bad day. That was my first experience of advocacy. And me advocating, I learned that I was helping other people who did not have that voice to say the same thing that I probably would have said, you know. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing this, you know, because I got tired of seeing things not happen right. and I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I know things does not happen overnight. I know change is inevitable, even when we work on better efforts, there's going to come a point where that effort needs to be revitalized and reformed, so wow, very powerful topics to talk about. I want to circle back around as we get ready to end. What's next for you? What is going on this journey? Where do you see yourself going forward? Such a powerful advocate, mentor, role model. And if you don't mind me saying, it's so important to have people like yourself in positions of power and to make change. So I just want to say from my heart, to yours, I am honored and I am privileged to know you and to see the work that you're doing. So what's next?
Well, I think for me, thank you for those kind words. I think for me, what's next for me is to run for office. I'm pretty sure a lot of individuals have been telling me that for years. But I don't want to do it just because, of the power that comes with it, of the benefits of coming in office. I think I want to do it because when was the last time that we were able to see a former foster youth take that place of power, legislate how the fifth largest economy handles foster youth, how we get them treated? Why is it that we have to wait for advocates to come and tell us, hey, we're being mistreated? I'm not able to visit my siblings. I have to get court ordered, visitations on the record in order to go and have that love that, these systems are not giving me. Why is it that we have to wait for that? For me, is just continuing to advocate. LA County has over 30,000 foster youth, maybe even more. So we represent a big chunk of those, our foster youth population. And so how can we ensure that this biggest county with the biggest budget, with the biggest population, have and provide youth-centered services to these youth? How can we ensure that when there's undercounting of foster youth in our school districts, if they're not giving the adequate services, how can we hold those systems accountable for taking care of these children and these young adults? For me, my legacy, I will say, is to inspire other former foster youth, probation youth, homeless youth, special education youth to run for office. Just because you have this stigmatization of being a foster youth, being a probation youth, or these challenges and barriers that these systems place on you, that doesn't make it a barrier for you unless you make it yourself. You can go under that barrier, you could go over it, around it. There's ways to make your mission and goal achievable if you want it to be. And so for me, making sure that I create that pathway forward for my brothers and sisters in different systems, but also ensuring that we are able to bring and create that unity. Because if you really think about, if there's 60,000 foster youth in California, how powerful would it be if we all come together and we hold our state legislatures and assembly members accountable, and even the governor, on issues like that's 60,000 youth. And if you bring on top of that allies, if you think about our other neighbor states, if we all come together to create, that domino effect in other states, like you said, a lot of other states look at California. How can we ensure that we hold that influence powerful enough to influence other states and how they treat other younger system-involved youth?
Wow. One thing I'm going to say coming out of this conversation, and I want to have you back on, I would love to have you and some of your other, youth commissioners on a round table, and let's break down those conversations. Let's break down those themes that we're seeing in LA. And as I get ready to end, this episode, season 2 is gonna look a bit similar, but a little bit different, because I'm going to continue to interview people, which I will talk about this on some of my lives and Q&As. But I'm going to continue to interview people and capturing their experience and their expertise. But I also want to integrate roundtable discussions with multiple people from states and avenues, talking about these hard conversations. Like for you, I think it's important you have, there's been a position created to, support and advocate and to highlight these issues and try to make sure that these issues are taken care of. I would love to have some of you and some of your other commissioners on to continue that conversation, to raise awareness, and similar to other states, they have youth advisory boards. Having some of those people from those youth advisory boards come on and let's have that roundtable discussion to talk about some of these issues. So if you guys are listening, know that I'm gonna be looking out. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add one thing to that part. Our county wanted to make us an advisory role to the board of supervisors,
Mhm.
and we're like, no, we're not going to be an advisory role. We're going to have power. And so for those that don't know, our board of supervisors are called the 5 Queens of LA. So we're under the 5 most powerful people in California. These ladies have a lot of power and hold a lot of power within the whole state. In even some cases, the governor himself. So we need to push these states that have advisory boards already to become commissions themselves, to hold that power. But to be honest, I'm happy to wrap up your season with you. And I'm looking forward to working with other people, other youth, kind of how we're comparing California with Michigan. I haven't met someone from Michigan so far, so I'm glad that you were the first one and kind of sharing your experience in the system there. But I'm down to do roundtables with you and other youth in general to kind of compare how our different states vary and how they're very similar in the needs and success.
Definitely. I appreciate it. And I'm so honored, and as I continue through, we talked about a lot here today. Some people gonna get mad, some people not gonna get mad. Some people gonna be like, dang, I've been waiting for somebody to say this, But I think the most important thing is I'm not here, and I say this in the most polite and respectful way. I'm not here to make you comfortable. This podcast is not here to make you guys comfortable because too many things have been going wrong throughout our child welfare system as a nation. I'm not talking about one singular state. I'm not talking about one singular county. I'm talking about as a nation that has trickled down to states, to counties, and what have you, and I know there's not going to be a uniform this or uniform that, but we need to address the issues, because it's hurting. It's hurting. The number of foster youth coming into care is not decreasing. It's not. If anything, it's increasing, and we need to figure out how we can support these individuals and also increase some of these statistics as far as education, as far as employment, as far as homelessness, So, we need to do better and we need to think about it. The only way I know that we can start that change and start that action is by me providing the topics and disclosing these information and you taking that back home to your friends, to your family, to your coworkers and starting the conversation. There's this wonderful picture that I posted on my Instagram where it talks about fostering and said, foster. If you can't foster, or it says adopt. If you can't adopt, foster. If you can't foster, mentor, and then it goes down to similar things like that. There's always something that you can do. To the very minimum is educate. Is educate, very minimum, We do it every day. We post a status, we send a message, we send a text, just educate and be aware, and educate yourself. So as I end out season 1, I just want to say again, I am so appreciative of the support, of the recognition, of my own state around this, being able to interview 3 directors, something that I didn't think was going to happen. I was just going to be real with you guys. I did not think was going to happen, but be able to interview 3 directors and talk to them and see what their initiatives would be, but also interview many different youth throughout different states and different demographics of different systems and what have you, and to be able to hear their sides and their experiences. And this is only the beginning. This is only the beginning, because I plan to do some collaborations with some organizations over the summer. I will be going live, to have some Q&As, and I hope to have some of my guests join me on some of those lives, to just have that conversation. I plan to be doing a lot of different things in season 2. I want to interview people individually, but also have roundtables, more topical conversation about some of the big things that are affecting foster youth, refugees, homeless youth, and their own, So yeah, stay tuned. Lastly, my last question for you. What tips and tidbits or advice do you have to leave us today in lasting comments?
I'll say for the tips part is just loving yourself, reflecting on yourself, on your achievements, always being open-minded and ready to learn, respectful, but also having a positive support system around you will be the biggest thing that I'll say. I wouldn't be here if I wouldn't have a community outside of foster, outside of my brothers and sisters from the foster probation system. Ensuring that you keep an open mind and helping and getting help from other organizations and other people that might give you a chance to look at a different environment that you're used to. Last comments is just, let's just keep moving forward. I think this podcast is one way of elevating voices that don't usually get heard. So how can we create, awareness of different things that are going on, both from system impacted youth, but also those that provide the service. So the directors that you were able to interview, how can we bring more awareness of what other states are doing, inviting other key stakeholders that impact at-risk youth, and just having conversations with us and allowing us to give our point of view, kind of like our way of saying this is what's going on our side, because internally we have one way of seeing things and externally there's other people that see it differently. So always, we're open to discussions and ways of improving it. But I think it's also ensuring that we recognize that there's bureaucracy, that there is red tape in our systems. So if we're not able to do it internally, how can external partners push those that have the power to remove the red tape, to remove the bureaucracy that exists, or even themselves provide the service? Nonprofits, how can you step up? Community coalitions, how can you step up and address the need that you see? And so just keep moving forward, being a good Christian. I think for me, I'm very into religion, and that kept me grounded. And so having that spiritual, part of my way of life has been very helpful for me. So moving forward and just being firm in what I believe, my values, my principles that have been taught for me and that I believe in. So I will leave with that, making sure that you know what your principles are, what your values are, and ensuring that you yourself reflect as a human being, as a advocate, as a leader, as a human being, where you at now and where you want to go moving forward.
So powerful. It has been a privilege listening to your story and hearing your expertise and your journey. I know you've been advocating for a while, you know. I think my first encounter with you, we saw each other, but I don't think we really got to conversate. Was at Shadow Day, 2019. You know, I saw you. You know, I remember your face and stuff like that, but I don't think we really got to conversate. You know, and it's just such a privilege to meet your acquaintance again and to be able to conversate. And I'd be one to say, you know, conversation isn't over. You know, I'm glad to be able to connect with you, and I look forward to collabing and connecting in the future and continuing this conversation. This has been a blast. This has been a blast and truly a blessing. I spoke about my faith and my journey with that and the part it played in my healing, amongst other things, but my faith was one that kept me grounded. Throughout this podcast, you will hear bits and pieces. One thing I want to leave here and say as I end up this episode is that I didn't know what I was getting into by starting this January 7th. I remember December, you know, even a little bit into November, I was like, I need to do something. I had people that were in my corner, like, you know, I feel like there's a calling on your life. I feel like there's some things that you need to do. I think you need to step out in faith. And I really didn't understand what they were saying. I was like, all right, you know, I do advocacy, I do all this other stuff. What are you talking about? Like, and I immediately went into prayer and trying to figure out what that may be, you know, and I feel like God put on my heart to be able to open this space. You know, I didn't really know. I just was like, I'm gonna be obedient and do it. You know, came January 7th, you know, I interviewed somebody and, you know, I did this, and I have been learning what God wanted me to do throughout this season. You know, developing my mission, developing my purpose of this podcast, developing what conversation I want to have here. And I can say it firmly, I understand my assignment. You know, I tell people, you know, I'm not a preacher. I'm not, you know, a Sunday school teacher. My ministry is advocacy and pushing the rights, the different rights and the right things that are needed in the foster care and child welfare community. That's my ministry. That's why I'm here. That's my purpose. And that's the legacy that I want to leave here, that I have been obedient. And I have held true to, like you said, you know, my values, my morals, but also done the work to help love my neighbors, you know, essentially love my neighbors and treat them right. So this has been a privilege and an honor to be able to bring this to you guys. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to get to a place of stability, you know. And this podcast has been one step on my own self-journey towards stability and helping others. This has been Resilient Voices and Beyond. Thank you, and I'll see you guys soon.